Welcome to Lecture 3. In this lecture, I want to revisit some of the concepts that we've already introduced and talk about them in terms of worldviews and paradigms, research paradigms. I'll unpack the meaning of these terms as we go along. If you remember, in the first lecture, we looked at some structures that research has to conform to in order to be meaningfully called research. So we recognize that research has got these properties. And in the second lecture, we reduce these down to some conditions. So we could say, well, really it's got to conform to these particular conditions in order to be recognizable, and perhaps we can use these as criteria to look at certain kinds of practice, particularly I think professional practice, and to ask the question, well, is this also research? And now I want to reconsider whether it's really the case that all research has to follow these particular properties and conditions, and perhaps why it does so. Now, again, thinking back to the previous lecture, lecture number 2, I showed you a diagram of a network of activities. And this diagram is taking another look at that network of activities. So what I'm proposing here is that at the top of the diagram we have the researcher, the individual, perhaps the community, who are going to undertake research or professional activity. And they have a value system. As an individual, they have a value system. Let's say that design is an important activity, that aesthetic considerations should be part of the design process and not just mechanical efficiency and so on. These would be values that either identify the particular individual, differentiate the particular individual, or make them part of a group or community. So like-minded people share values, and to some extent this determines whether they form a community or not. Now, from the point of view within this value system, we look out as practitioners to the world of action and activities, represented by the little spots down at the bottom of the diagram. So there are a lot of things that we can do in the world. We can make a drawing, make a painting, invent some new product. We can take the dog for a walk. We can do all sorts of things. And some of these fall within our perception of interesting activities, significant activities to do towards our professional objectives. So in this process, we exercise selectivity. And I think selectivity happens perhaps in two ways. Certain things occur to us because of our preferences, our innate interests, but also as professionals, as researchers, we actively select. When we go into the library, we go to a particular section in the library. We perhaps seek out books rather than journals, or vice versa. We look for things that are illustrated. When we search online, we use certain keywords that narrow the field, that act selectively on a body of data or possible actions in order to reduce them down to ones that we think are most likely to be useful. So here we recognize that diagram from lecture 2, that amongst this myriad of possibilities, there are a cluster of activities that seem to us to be productive. So we select those in particular. We are going to go to the library. We are going to interview somebody. We are going to subscribe to a journal and read it regularly. We're going to learn a new technique, use a particular material. A number of things one could say here. And remember, we're trying to think not only about academic things one might do, like go to the library, but also professional things one might do, such as learning new techniques using new materials. And how we can fit these together to broaden the meaningfulness of the term research when considered in the professional domain, the purpose of the professional doctorate. So back to the diagram, these actions are selected by us in part because we see the connection between them, the connectivity. And this relates to the diagram again in lecture 2, where we saw how question and answer and method were related to one another and all occur within a context of being meaningful to a particular audience. So if we think about this diagram that we're looking at now, we can see that amongst the relationships that are connected at the bottom of the diagram are going to be issues that could be regarded as meaningful questions, techniques that are available to us, pieces of machinery, things we know how to do, things that are methods that are important in our professional field and accepted and used by our colleagues. So these would obviously be high in our list of priorities for us to select as relevant to us, given our value system. Now the question is, of course, which ones do we want to select, and we'll come on to that later on in some other presentations. But I want to reinforce the idea that there are hundreds of possibilities out here. Now, some of these possibilities are not going to contribute to our idea of research. So the fact that we go to the studio and pick up a paintbrush and start to create a painting, that might be a very useful professional activity, but it may or may not contribute to research. What I'm claiming here is that we can increase its potential to be research if we see the way in which it is connected to other activities, the way in which it's going to be a method that is likely to produce a meaningful answer to a relevant question, for example, and that we have the ability to connect that back into our value system, relating it along the way to other things that we know, other things that we accept. So now I think you're going to start to recognize that this is a description of a literature review in traditional research, in which we identify who are the leaders in our field, what are the questions that they are addressing, what are the methods that they are using, and what are the productive outcomes that are having impact in our professional community. So we start to create a pattern that is recognizable to traditional academics and to the university context, but we are adopting a more flexible approach, I think, as to what those things could be, so that when we look into the field of possible actions, we are broadening our scope. We are not looking into the professional world seeking only our academic objectives. We are looking more widely at the potential for professionally oriented activities to generate meaningful knowledge. And so in this way, we can make the connection between the wide range of professional activities that we can undertake and that we do undertake, some of which have the potential to be converted or developed into research in a way that others do not. And what we're looking for are these key indicators that there is a question that arises in the workplace or in the professional environment that is therefore relevant to what we're doing and likely to be relevant and of interest to our peers. There is an answer, well, we don't know what the answer is perhaps, or the response, the outcome, but there is potential for it to lie within our professional view. There are methods, either ones that we already have or ones that we can see we could develop, again within the range of possibility that we have before us, the scope of the professional environment or the academic environment. And the audience, I think, as professional doctorate candidates, you have a great advantage that your audience is already identified for you because you are immersed in a professional activity yourself. Part-time students doing a doctorate, but also working professionally, means that you know who your audience are. It's your professional colleagues away from the university. Now, it's not just one set of values and the selectivity that we apply when we look at the world of possible activity. There are many such clusters, many different sets of values, for example, values as scientists, values as astronomers, as architects, as fine artists, as particular social groups working in particular environments of consumption and use. All of these would represent different value communities at the top of the diagram. But from each vantage point, we get a different perspective on the world of possible actions at the bottom there. The world of possible actions includes different things, but nonetheless we are mapping onto this world of possible actions the requirement, a selective perception first of all, and the requirement that we can identify connected elements that we can use in the world of actions to convert into a research project. So this, I think, shows that different groups with different values will approach the same set of possibilities and find different results. And there are even different ranges of possibilities. So there is a wide variety of potential out there, a great deal of potential, and there's little or no risk of everybody choosing to do the same thing. So the problem of originality in research is not really a problem at all. Originality is out there. It's everywhere. There's no problem in finding enough originality. The problem is much more to find rigorous connections between all the things that we do. Particularly, I think, as experienced professionals who are perhaps used to looking at the world of possibility and picking out certain things and doing them and finding them professionally relevant, what I'm inviting you to reconsider is, are those the best actions to select? Are they the most connected in terms of them being research? And there perhaps our objectives are slightly different. The connections that are required for professional relevance and productivity are not necessarily the connections that I have identified for you in Lecture 2 that are necessary conditions for research. So, as usual, a couple of references, both to work inspired by or as outcomes from the Research into Practice group here at the University of Hertfordshire, and also a reference outside of that more broadly, which helps you to link from this theoretical proposal for describing how to create a meaningful research structure in a creative area, how to make a connection between that theory that I'm proposing to you and theories already established in philosophy of science, or in this case, in the work of Gubber and Lincoln, in qualitative research and the emergence of new paradigms to do with mainly sociology and education in the 1990s and onwards.